Parliament. So let's go back to Professor Dirk Kotze. And we heard from the President himself a short while ago talking about the overwhelming majority that the ANC received through the polls. So saying that the opposition is trying to illegitimately now use technicalities to try and get rid of him in Parliament, putting on a very brave face. But given the numbers, do you think he's not feeling a little bit weak right now?
I think President Zuma tonight is disappointed. Because it's not an overwhelming support for him. He actually lost support compared to previous motions of no confidence. At the same time, the fact that there was so much pressure put on the ANC caucus, and despite that, a significant number have defied that, that is clearly an indication that there's a type of internal rebellion within the ANC's caucus taking place. Over and above the known ones like Makosi, Koza and others, there were significant more than the 4 or 5. That's very public. And I think for President Zuma this is really a serious concern, that he is in a sense losing control over the ANC. And it is just building up momentum for December. So from that point of view, I think despite the fact that they want to delegitimize the motion of no confidence, and as Julius Malema and others said, it's a constitutional mechanism. It's not something invented by the opposition. It's actually something that the ANC negotiated in the constitutional negotiations. Their members, when it was in 1996, the constitution adopted, they voted for it. So it is something which is inherent in the constitutional dispensation, and now they are trying to undermine the legitimacy of these mechanisms. So I think from that point of view, the idea of President Zuma, which was also used in the debate itself, is saying, well, it's majoritarianism on the one side, which they gained through the elections. On the other hand, it is the opposition parties which is using mechanisms, constitutional mechanisms, as well as the courts, in order to circumvent that. And I think that's the way in which they try to delegitimize what is actually being done by the opposition.
So, again, President Zuma carried through that narrative that we heard from the ANC speakers during the course of the day, trying to separate the person from the party, so that when you look at Jacob Zuma, you see the ANC as opposed to Jacob Zuma on his own as a person. And that the vote actually wasn't about anything other than the fitness of one person to be in office. And he kept on going, you've proved that the ANC cannot be destroyed. Yes. You've proved that the ANC continues to have support. So he's almost trying to wear the ANC clothes for protection. But yes, the other side of that now, the opposition had said to them, to the ANC MPs, listen, after today, you can no longer blame Zuma. Yes. If you vote for him, that means you are equally guilty of the crimes that we're accusing him of. So is that the fallout that the ANC now has to take on collective responsibility for an individual's misdemeanors or misgivings? Yes,
I think that's the catch-22 situation in which the ANC was. Actually in both cases, whether it was the open vote or the secret vote, the secret vote in a sense gave them the best scenario, the best case scenario of where they could have voted. But because it is the best case scenario, now anyone from outside, the opposition or whoever else, can say you had the best possible opportunity to vote President Zuma out and you didn't do it. So it's not anymore, there's no excuses anymore within the ANC to say, but we didn't have the opportunity to do it. You know? So in a sense that the onus now comes back to the ANC to say, why did they still support President Zuma in this election, in this motion of no confidence? And I think this is going to become the dilemma of the ANC. They cannot hide anymore behind President Zuma and others, because they must now take full responsibility for today's vote.
Professor, there was a fear, and it's been talked about on the markets, and interestingly I've been watching, and it seems like every time there's an indication that the president may leave, the markets are happy. But this time there was a lot of concern about the instability caused by the entire cabinet stepping down. We then would have to have a new leader, and it would have to come from within the ANC itself. So suddenly you have these factional forces exploding. But a vote like this, which shows, like you say, at least 35 ANC members voted with the opposition, isn't that already exposing huge factionalism? And what does that mean for coming months for this party?
Well, it means that the ANC is moving towards December as a divided movement, or as a divided political party, which we in a sense know already. We've seen it in the debates within the NEC. We've seen it in other moments within the ANC, also in the policy conference, for example, where they were also divided. But now we've seen it also in Parliament. I think we've seen it even in Cabinet. So there's no way nowhere to hide anymore. In terms of saying, but this is the core of the ANC. In my view, I try to understand what is happening now, and the only way in which I understand it is to say there's actually two power bases within the ANC. There's actually two ANCs within one. It's not a divided ANC in the sense of that there's a splinter group. It is actually, there's one power block which is around President Zuma and Dr. Dlamini Zuma, and our other power block around the Deputy President Ramaphosa. None of them are at the moment dominant. And that is why there's actually a stalemate in the ANC, whether it is in the NEC or whether in Cabinet or others. And that stalemate cannot, there was the possibility that with this motion that if he was removed, there could have been a resolution of the stalemate. Now we have to wait for December, basically, in order to see who's going to win and which group is going to become then dominant.
In all the while that we're talking, actually, the people that need to be convinced are the voters. And these voters are busy listening to what happened today, observing what happened in the votes, and just heard the president now saying, and I need to get your understanding of his state of mind. He said that people are spreading propaganda. They're trying to divide us, creating impression that we don't have the support of the people. This time a year ago, they lost support significantly from those very same people. This vote of no confidence, he's lost even more support. So does he genuinely believe what he's saying, or can he not see actually which way the momentum is going?
I think when you're in a situation like this, and it is not only him, there are many leaders. I think someone like President Mugabe is in a similar situation, who's been in power for a long time, and when they start to see but it is slipping, then they have to rationalize it. The easiest way to rationalize is there's a threat from outside, whether it is the West, or there's a third force, or there's regime change, or there's interference by the West in the ANC or in the opposition parties. That's normally an easy way of getting around it, to say it's not actually my problem. It's not something which I caused. It's an external intervention that is really the threat. And that then explains that even within South Africa, it's not South Africans who are concerned and upset. It is actually that they have been bribed by whoever from outside as the external threat. And I think this has become a refrain within President Zuma's way of presenting himself, presenting the ANC. We've seen it this afternoon with Minister Nathi Mthethwa, where he was talking about regime change and sort of external interventions, something similar. And I think that is one of it's in a sense a denialism, denying the real situation, and that's a way of coping with the current situation.
Professor Dirk Kotze, thank you for joining us, and please stay with us. We'd like to chat to you further, but let's just wrap up some of the events. If you didn't get to watch the action in Parliament earlier, leaders of opposition parties pushed hard to convince ANC members to remove President Jacob Zuma and free the country from what they called a deep-rooted scourge of corruption.
But ANC speakers insisted that their attempts are a ploy for regime change.
The long-awaited motion of no confidence debate, almost all opposition leaders lamented the prevalence of corruption and state capture under President Zuma. They insisted their effort is not to remove the ANC, but the president.
If we do the right thing today, we will give our children a better future that they deserve. Vote for your hopes, honorable members, not your fears. Do the right thing today. Vote with your conscience and remove this corrupt and broken president from office.
We are rising against the Guptas who are reshuffling cabinet. We are rising against the Guptas who are appointing the boards in ESCOM, in PRASA, in Transnet, in SABC, in SAA.
We're not here to say ANC must fall. It is against corruption, it is against state capture, it is against one man.
We have to seize the opportunity to put the people and the country first. In this regard, let us vote against the abuse of power, the infamous bogus intelligence report, and the abuse of the resources of our people.
Please don't vote for someone, all of us, don't vote for someone who lied to our people and stole their money.
If you do not give the support to this motion and remove the president who's a blame shifter, then you say to the people of South Africa, the problem is not the president, the real problem is the ANC government.
If President Zuma survived this motion, we are truly on a highway to hell. The economic revolution of this presidency is the Gupta revolution.
But the ANC pushed back, arguing that their demand is tantamount to a coup d'etat.
The opposition in this House are doing all they can, including sponsoring this motion, further to divide the ANC so that we are a shadow of what we were during the 2019 general election. And they want the ANC members to help them achieve that goal.
This motion is therefore founded on fake news. The target of our detractors with this motion is the authority of government, because what they aim for is a coup d'etat to overthrow of the legitimate government through this destabilization.
Yes. Legislators are currently preparing to vote for the motion of no confidence through a secret ballot. They need a simple majority of 200 members plus one to pass the motion successfully. Manelisi Tubase, SABC News, Parliament.
All right, so that's some of the words that have been coming out of the various speakers during the course of the day, ahead of course, that vote of no confidence, which has kept President Jacob Zuma in power.
Indeed, the noes had it, 198, but the yeses, a lot of analysis tonight about what it means that 177 people voted yes. 201 was needed, so it's not anywhere near there, but it's significantly more than has ever been seen before. And our analysts in studio are saying at least 35 ANC MPs voted with the opposition. Now, lots of fiery speeches tonight outside Parliament. Let's cross live to our reporter, Ngoba Nchunu.
Well, certainly it has been an anxious wait for most people here in Johannesburg as they awaited that final tally from Parliament today. And many here certainly have been glued to their screen this afternoon to see exactly how things play out in Parliament today. And as we saw exactly there in a few minutes ago, the Speaker announcing those results in Parliament. And certainly there was a mixed reaction from most people here who have been watching here the developments that unfolded in Parliament today. And just to get a sense of what many thought of this process, I will start with you, sir. What did you think of that vote that went on today? Did you expect the results that you saw there?
Yeah, obviously, Zuma, at least, it's like that Zuma or no Zuma, that thing Yafana, say, I expect anything in a Shafana. I'm going to party one or Gena man, a man Shafana guy, Kale Garistra la Josa, I come in Chomu, Shafana. The party the judge show, but just show, but I show, Gatigas, Ingome one, Athama forgot. Majita Panda, why, and just as Panda, 90% of youth are Spani, Shafan, Gatigas, NC Potengofu, or Takuzuma Gatigas, Mara, ANC, as the ANC. Mr. Lang, a winner, Naminanta Taka Luka, it's like Alexander. You put red text Swafana. Come 2019 Stofana. The same. So change.
Okay. There he's saying there, Francis, that indeed whether or not President Jacob Zuma was removed or whether was kept in his position, it doesn't make any difference because they continue to face battles on a daily basis. So I'm going to move again to another person here who's seated here. Sir, what did you make of the vote that happened here today? I know that you are watching attentively to the proceedings here today. What did you think? Did you think that the opposition actually did have a chance in this particular vote?
Yes, I want to say thanks God for everything He's done for today. I want to say thanks Mandela. Then I want to say I can't believe this. NC obviously is going to win. Thanks for everything then.
So you were very hopeful that President Zuma stays in his position?
Yes, that's president.
And why is that?
Nothing I can say. It's president. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There you've just heard it, Francis. If I can just move again to see if I can speak to more people here, just to find out their reaction on this issue as well. I'm now going to speak to this gentleman seated here. Sir, your thoughts on the process that happened, that unfolded in Parliament today. What did you make of it? Certainly there was a lot of tension as people waited for those results.
Yeah. I must say I'm highly disappointed of the results because I really felt like our MPs had South Africa's great interest at heart. But the results proved otherwise, and I hope it's also a lesson to our president that it could get worse. I mean, if it wasn't for his female puppets, I think it would have been a different experience.
Well, thank you very much for your view there as well. Well, you've just heard it there, Francis, from the horse's mouth. People expressing their views here in Johannesburg about the outcome of that particular process, saying that indeed some of them supporting that and saying that they welcome that development that took place in Parliament, and some of them saying, of course, that they wished for different outcomes and saying that they hope that this is a lesson for the ANC going forward to actually respect the voters and to follow, and for President Jacob Zuma himself to actually do what he's meant to do in his office and to respect the office that he has been appointed to. So it's back to you in studio with that.
Thank you very much, Mangoba. And perhaps the market also wanting a different outcome. I'm just looking at the Rand, and I can tell you that in response to this vote, and we know because there's been quite a significant movement, it's weakened by about 1.4% against the dollar. We were almost level against the dollar by the close, slightly stronger, but we've seen quite a significant weakening.
And we can genuinely attribute it to this because the moment that we heard that it was going to be a secret ballot, the Rand got stronger.
It was incredible, yeah.
Then the vote happens and it's a 1% weaker, so the market's not entirely excited about that. All right. So police have a... Oh, all right, okay. Before we get into that next story, I am quite intrigued. We've been focusing on this 177 votes for the motion to remove the president, but we haven't spent time analysing the 198 votes that we assume went with the ANC. On any given day, the ANC has 62% majority in the House, which means they should have, on a good day, got as many as 249 members to vote for a motion of the ANC. They didn't cross the 200 plus 1 themselves. And that's quite significant, isn't it? When you're a majority party, but you yourself cannot get the majority of your members to vote for you.
Yes, I think the 201 is the magic number, and that was for the opposition the magic number in order to pass the motion. But if we turn around the argument, then it was also for the ANC to really show that they have the 201 vote support, and they didn't receive it because it's now 198. At the same time, as you indicate, the difference between the just below 50% and the 62% is at least 12% difference, which means that that is, whether it is 35 or even more, or those who were absent who didn't participate in the vote, those are all indicative of the difference of the movement that we've seen from the previous motion of no confidence and the swing that actually happened within the ANC. And I think this is, again, very significant because it's the first time that it happens. One can say it's because of the secret vote, the secret ballot, but still, it is an indication that there is now some sort of movement break away within the ANC, not in the NEC necessarily, but within the parliamentary caucus. And I think that is the big headache for the ANC, and specifically for President Zuma, given all the effort that they've put in order to consolidate the caucus. Despite that, the significant number have now joined with the opposition. And despite all the sort of the warmongering of saying, well, this is actually aimed against the ANC, it's about regime change, it is about the history of the ANC, it's about the legacy of the ANC. Those are all the arguments that were used, and despite that, we've seen it. So that argument to some extent didn't work. I mean, that is the only interpretation we can give, and that the focus in a sense did return to President Zuma as the main person or the main issue that was discussed at this event.
Professor, these numbers are interesting, and you were talking earlier about the fact that the ANC itself was involved in the constitutional negotiations that led to two tools. The one is impeachment, which has this huge threshold, yes, 2/3 of the House. The other is this motion of no confidence in the president, but that also results in cabinet going. Yes. Was there thinking behind that, or is this just about giving MPs different tools to deal with different scenarios in future?
It's about the uniqueness of the South African parliamentary combined with the executive system, which is unique, relatively unique. It's only South Africa, Botswana and Angola that has this system. We are not a presidential system on the one hand, like in the US or in France or those others, and we are also not a parliamentary system like in Britain, but we are a hybrid system. So that means that's why the president is elected by parliament. And because he's elected by parliament, there's also a motion of no confidence that's possible. We see it in countries where there's prime ministers, where there's a motion of no confidence in the prime minister or in the cabinet or in the government. But because he's in a sense in the same position as a prime minister when it comes to the appointment, in terms of his powers, he's similar to that of a president. That creates this hybrid situation, which means that the motion of no confidence is possible. The impeachment is typical of a presidential system. We've seen it now in Brazil. We've seen it in South Korea, where the presidents were impeached and removed. We've seen it in the past with Bill Clinton, also in the US, possibly with President Trump in future. And that is then the presidential component, which is also incorporated in the South African Constitution. The impeachment is, first of all, yes, the threshold is much higher, 2/3, but at the same time, the reasons for impeachment are very limited. It is only about when there's a violation of the Constitution, or when there's a violation of law, or when there's incapacity. So it's not about confidence. And the motion of no confidence is a political decision. Impeachment is more of a judicial, legal type of decision, and that's the two main distinctions between the two.
Prof, if we for a moment assume that nobody really believed that this was about regime change, then the question we must ask is that those people who voted to make sure that the president stayed, they must have weighed up some things. They must have said, this is why I have to vote in this way, because they were free to vote in the way that they wanted to. And yes, a few may have lost their jobs, but what was the biggest fear in terms of the cost of President Zuma leaving office now as opposed to some date in the future?
I think there are different reasons for different people, but maybe quickly to summarize them. The first one, I think, was a big issue, and this is who determines when President Zuma must leave, the ANC or the opposition? I think within the ANC there was a lot of people who said we cannot afford to give the credit to the opposition, that the DA and the EFF will tomorrow go in the streets with their banners and say we were actually the ones who pulled it through. You know? The ANC wants to take that decision themselves. The other one is about the fact that they are so close to the national conference, and with the succession debate, the divisions within the ANC. Imagine it if this motion was successful, and from tomorrow onwards the Speaker would have been acted as President for a few days before the National Assembly elects a new acting President. Then the question is, who's the consensus candidate for the ANC to become the new President, given the factionalism within the ANC? It will be almost disastrous for the ANC in terms of the infighting that will, and what it will happen is, to some extent, the decision of December would have been forwarded to now. And at the same time, because Dr. Dlamini Zuma does not qualify as a candidate, because she's not a member of parliament, it means that the Zuma group does not have a candidate. And I think they were caught unprepared for a situation like this, and they realized it. And because of that, especially those who were sort of leaning towards President Zuma and Dlamini Zuma would say, well, it's just, the cost will be just too much for the ANC.
Professor Dirk Kotze, thank you so much for joining us and incredible insight tonight. Professor of Politics from UNISA. All right, so we've been talking about the winds of change blowing in South Africa's politics. We haven't shown you the weather for a while, so let's do that, and then we'll be back with your headlines very shortly.